Hello, welcome to the 1874 show on the Villa View. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by the Athletic's Gregg Evans to talk all things Aston Villa and sometimes talking about people's internet not working as well. This show is sponsored by Luke Roper. If you want to get 20% off everything they have to offer, then use the code TVV20 and you'll get 20% off everything, including their new range that they've just bought out. Greg, international break, but I'm sure you're still busy as ever.
Yeah. Hello, Dan. Hello to everyone listening. Yeah, very busy actually. Working on a couple of stories that hopefully can get done before the end of the week on the Athletic. We're currently speaking as Jacob Ramsey is captaining the England under-21s, aren't we? They are playing tonight, I believe. I was at the game on Saturday doing the under-21s versus France. Jacob Ramsey came off the bench and was excellent. So, yeah, been keeping quite busy, mate.
Yeah, nice little finish from him as well, adding to the goal he'd scored the week before for Villa. We're going to do a special show tonight. You may notice my shirts in the background. I mean, this is useless if you're listening via audio only, but I have a Dwight York and a Juan Pablo Angel shirt behind me, Greg, and I've done this on purpose because today we're going to look at Ollie Watkins and where he fits in terms of Aston Villa's best ever Premier League strikers. Now, we've got some stats that we'll have on through the show. I know you're very into your stats at the moment, Greg. Every piece that you write nowadays has got some stats in there, so this will be right up your alley at the moment. We've got AVFC Stato probably in the chat as well, who's kindly provided us with those stats from his database, so we thank him very much. But just off the top of your head, Greg, again, I ask you every week, can't remember when you started covering Villa. I think it was when Tim Sherwood came in, wasn't it? In terms of just all-round strikers since Tim Sherwood came in, how have you found Ollie Watkins as Villa's main man, and what do you know about him? Maybe stuff that people wouldn't know behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think Ollie Watkins fits in for me probably somewhere in between Christian Benteke and Tammy Abraham. I think that those are the three strikers that I've enjoyed watching the most in a Villa shirt, and certainly have performed the best in my time covering the club. Obviously, I'm aware of all the strikers that played for Villa previously, but not so many of them were under my watch as a journalist. But I think with Watkins, he's just finding a much more ruthless streak now. I think with Tammy, for example, in the Championship, he used to get a lot of chances, didn't he? And often, he scored over 25 goals in the Championship, which was incredible. I remember him being awarded that medal on the pitch for the last home game in the Championship. But he used to get a lot of chances, didn't he? Whereas with Watkins now, I think he's developed, this ruthless streak. There was a stat that was doing the rounds earlier in the week. Whereas out of the top 5 or 6 leagues in Europe, out of every striker that's had more than 50 shots, Watkins has got the highest shot accuracy. So he's certainly improved his game. He's worked on a lot of stuff behind the scenes, which we can maybe go into a little bit later. I think he's reaping the rewards now.
Yeah, I mean, that ruthless streak was the thing he got criticised about, probably a little bit under Dean Smith, certainly under Steven Gerrard, and maybe a little bit at the start of Emery's tenure as well. But since the World Cup, it feels like he's worked on certain things. We know he works hard. He hires coaches in his own time to go through striking drills with him. But he has developed that ruthless streak in the second part of the season, and that's been the thing that sets him apart. Also, his first season, I feel he was very, very good in that lockdown season when you'd have watched him live every week, but none of us were able to do that at the time. He was very, very effective that season, scored a lot of goals. I think he had a drought of 10 games or something at one point, but he was still offering an awful lot to the team. Last season felt like not a wasted year, but I felt like he struggled more so than he did in the first season. And the fact that Danny Ings came in, I think, disrupted him a little bit. And now it's funny now that Danny Ings has gone, that he seems to thrive on just being that one striker, being that main man option, doesn't he?
I think he does, actually. Yeah, I mean, you speak to different players and they have different opinions on whether they want competition. And sometimes strikers actually like knowing that if they don't perform that well, they're going to lose their place. So that motivates them more and they become a little bit more selfish. But with Watkins, I do think that he likes the fact that he knows he's going to be playing pretty much every week. He knows that he's the main man. And he's actually delivering at the same time, which is really important. I feel like he's just become a little bit more selfish as well, whereas he used to do a lot of other people's running. didn't he? If you look at him now, he's a little bit more selective with his runs. That gives him, perhaps the energy to really come alive when he needs to. And yeah, one little bit of information before this pre-season, he was one of the only players to go back to Bodymoor Heath a little bit earlier. He brought his striker coach with him, a finishing coach, and just worked for a couple of days, literally on just finishing, and just getting ready for that pre-season. Now, you could probably look at it and think, well, he didn't start the first half of the season very well, but that just shows his attitude and how much he's determined to become a real top elite striker, which he's not too far off now.
No, I mean, his record so far this season is outstanding. But if you look at the record in recent months, it's up there as one of the best in the Premier League. We've had some comments through, one on Facebook, Steve Webster. Ollie is a more complete modern forward than the two you've mentioned. Not as much an out-and-out striker, but much more involved. And David Style says Watkins has got all the tools to be talked about next to York, Dublin, Carew and Juan Pablo Angel. His all-round game is arguably better already. It's just about consistency. Now, we're going to try and rank him in these strikers. So we have a new producer today. Neil Dunworth has stepped in because Adam's unavailable. Neil, you will know from this channel, he comes on as himself and talks about Aston Villa with us and has his own channel as well for the love of Paul McGrath. But Neil is sitting in the producer's chair. To be honest, he hasn't got to do a lot to be better than Adam, in all honesty. If he puts a graphic on the screen that I asked for, this is an outstanding start. And there we go. Here it is straight away. Neil 1, Adam 0. So in terms of top scoring Aston Villa Premier League strikers, I'm going to reel these off because obviously some people are listening to this via audio only. So number 1 is Gabby Agbonlahor with 74 goals. He played a lot of games for Aston Villa, of course. Number 2 is Dwight York. He had 60 goals. This is Premier League goals only for Aston Villa, and we've only included strikers, by the way. Number 3 is Dion Dublin, which is 48. I'm being told that actually the graphic cannot be seen now, so it's not 1-0 to Neil at all. AVFC Stato saying we can't see the graphic, but I'll carry on anyway. Number 3 is Dion Dublin with 48. Number 4, Juan Pablo Angel with 44. Number 5 is Christian Benteke with 42. Number 6, Julian Joachim with 39. Number 7 is Dean Saunders. Now I can't see the list, so this is making for a great podcast. Number 7 is Dean Saunders on 38. 8, John Carew, 37. 9 is Darius Vassell on 35. And then sneaking into the top 10 is Ollie Watkins with 34. So Ollie's just made it into the top 10. The only other player, incidentally, that was in that top 10 was Gareth Barry with 41, I think, but we've taken him out because obviously he's a midfielder and we only want to look at forwards. So what's interesting with this, Greg, is that Ollie Watkins obviously isn't finished, whereas the 9 above are finished. Yeah. Where would you expect him to end up? Let's say he stays. He's got another couple of years left on his contract, Ollie Watkins. By this time next year, you'd feasibly say he should be in the top 3 of all-time Villa Premier League goal scorers.
Yeah, I mean, still a tough ask, isn't it, to get 15 goals in the next 12 months? I mean, it's a good return, that is. So.
Is it, though? Do you genuinely think that it is?
Yeah, it's a tough ask to keep scoring goals. He's broke records this year with his goal scoring form, and look at the amount he scored already this season. So, it's really, really difficult to keep scoring. And Villa will be signing another striker in the summer, so there'll be additional competition. Whether Watkins plays alongside the new guy or slips down to the bench or they rotate, we don't know yet. We'll wait and see. But yeah, I think it's a tough ask to get another 15 goals to get him into the top 3 in the next 12 months. But if he stays at the club for the next 2-3 seasons, I think he will be starting to look at that figure at Gabby Agbonlahor, because he's 30 behind now.
Yeah, around. It was Gabby. I've not got again. I've not got it. Let me get it up on my phone so I can. So I can have it.
It's 34 and 74. So yeah, 40 behind. But over 3 seasons, perhaps, can you do that?
I think so. I think he's got every chance. I kind of disagree with you a little bit. And so does Ad in the comments as well. He's saying if he's progressing, it shouldn't be that tough. I mean, it's not 12 months essentially, is it? Because obviously there's a summer in there. The rate he's going at the moment, and the way Emery's changed his game and has made him more of that penalty box player, I do take your point that if Villa sign a striker, Watkins actually may become more in the kind of Bailey role, mightn't he, floating a little bit more wide, and the other strikers asked to stay in the box more. So his role may change, but I just think he's got that confidence at the moment. He's got that rhythm. Doesn't really look like it's going anywhere at the moment. I mean, I'm cursing him now, and he won't score for 10 games. But I feel like something's clicked with him, and that something's changed, and he has got that ruthless streak that you talk of.
Yeah, I sat down with him for at length in November, just before during the World Cup. It was when Villa were over in Dubai, and I had breakfast with him and did an interview after. So
What did they have for breakfast?
You just had a coffee, actually. Yeah, they'd already eaten. It was just me eating, actually. So yeah,
What did you
I
have
had
for
some.
breakfast?
I just had eggs on toast on that, though.
I saw one of your breakfasts the other day. It was obscene, by the way, but it will carry on. You sent me a picture of what you had to eat. It was absolutely obscene.
That was an all-you-can-eat buffet type breakfast. Love them
Yeah.
ones. Anyway, back to Ollie Watkins.
Yes, please.
Yeah, and look, I had a bit of time with him and sort of found out a little bit more about how he was feeling about his own game. And he kind of said, look, I want to be in the conversation now when big tournaments come around for England. He was a little bit gutted that he didn't make the World Cup squad, but he kind of knew that his form wasn't good enough and that other players deserved to be there. And at the time, if you remember, Callum Wilson obviously was the third choice striker who went to the World Cup, and a player I really rate, actually, and I was glad to see him go. Not necessarily ahead of Watkins, but for England, because I think he's an excellent finisher when he's fit. But Wilson now he's having the kind of form in the second half of the season as Watkins was having in the first half of the season, and the roles have flipped around. But look at the English players we've got now: Harry Kane, Marcus Rashford, Ivan Toney, and Ollie Watkins. I mean, they're scoring so many goals between them in the Premier League. They're all in very, very good form. So there's plenty of options, and Saka as well, scoring a lot of goals, isn't he, for Arsenal too? But I think Watkins is now in those conversations. He might not be getting the recognition that he fully deserves yet, but he's certainly in the conversations again now, and that's what he was aiming for. So there's been big progress for him over the last 3 or 4 months. He's playing with a smile on his face. You can see that he's happy. I've spoke to him after a couple of games, and he's laughing every time he sees me. He said, I told you this is what I was trying to do. This is what I was aiming for. So it's working for him. And he's got the chance to break another record at this weekend, to become the first player, the first ever Villa player to score in 5 consecutive away games. Now, Dwight York was the last player to score in 4 consecutive away games before Watkins. So Watkins can rewrite history again this weekend. And as we've spoken about in the past, he's missing a goal against Chelsea, isn't he? His record against the top 6, the big 6, as they're more traditionally known. He's excellent. I think he's got 14 goals in 2.5 seasons, but he hasn't scored a goal against Chelsea yet. So that's the one he's missing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a good first half against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. I think it was last season. Watkins and Ings were playing as a pair. I remember him missing a big chance in the first half, and Villa went on to lose 3-0. So he'll want to put that right. And you wouldn't bet against him putting it right at the moment. Really controversial comment in the chat from Steve 82ish here, Greg. I feel this summer is the perfect time for us to move Ollie on whilst his stock is high, and we could make a profit for financial fair play. Surely that's not something that Villa will be even considering, even though I think he's only got 2 years left on his contract.
I've read a lot of comments, actually, of Villa fans saying similar things.
I'll say I strongly disagree with that. Just to caveat.
I disagree because I don't think Villa could replace him. I don't think they could get a striker. Well, they're going to need 2 strikers if they sell Watkins. I don't think they could get 2 strikers better than Watkins.
No.
They're going to be pushed to get one, and they're going to have to spend a serious amount of money to get him. But I think it would be a risk to sell Watkins and replace him.
I agree with you.
But I can understand the logic behind it. If you sign a player for £28 million, he produces for you for 3 seasons. It will be at the end of this season, and then you sell him on for double, perhaps, which is what he's worth now. He's an over £50 million player if he's scoring this amount of goals. So if a club comes in and bids over £50 million, perhaps Villa might look at it if they back themselves in the market to get a better replacement, but I think it'd be a risk. I don't think Villa could. I don't think Villa could find one.
There's nowhere for him to go, I would say, would be the other thing. I hate Arsenal linked every now and again. I think he's a
Well, I
great
mean,
player,
look,
but he's
there's
not
the
going
Arsenal.
Arsenal.
I don't think so,
No,
and
that's
he's
not
not
going to
going to
happen.
play very often if he does, is he?
No, there's nowhere for him to go, Ollie Watkins, and I'd be very upset if Villa sold him, especially now when it feels like everything's completely clicking for him as well. It would be bizarre to cash in on him at this point. Unai Emery seems to really, really like him as well. I don't know how much you know about that, Greg, but Unai Emery he feels to me like he's a big fan of Ollie Watkins, and you don't have to look at the turnaround. You know, they'll both probably be loving each other at the moment.
Mm. Yeah, the manager's enjoying working with Watkins. He when he first came, he set out a couple of routines where there was 3 or 4 scenarios in match day scenarios where he thought he would regularly get into, and told Watkins to work on those, which he has been doing. And I think it was the second game that he played away at Man United in the Cup. He scored from one of those scenarios. So Watkins immediately knew that the manager knew his game and what he was talking about. And they've obviously enjoyed working with each other since. Emery's obviously very demanding. We know that, and that there have been times where the manager has dug out players in front of the teammates for not sticking to various tasks. So even the strikers know exactly what they've got to be doing defensively, and Emery always speaks about defending first. You've got to defend from the top to make sure we get a clean sheet. Even though Watkins is the go-to guy, and if it wasn't for his goals, Villa would be significantly lower in the table, because that's probably the one issue at Villa at the moment, isn't it? If Watkins doesn't score, typically no one else does.
Yeah, there's not many players who've scored over 1 goal this season. I think Bardell,
Yeah,
Bailey, and Ramsey are the only one. Louise as well. Yeah, there's not
yeah,
many,
it's
is
a
there?
bit of a
And they're
concern,
all
isn't
under
it?
5 goals, 5 or under.
Yeah, that's the concern. Look, that last time out, the 3-0 win over Bournemouth was a bit different, and hopefully a sign of how it's going, because Emery wants his the players to share the goals around. But for Watkins, he's just got to continue being selfish and taking those shots when they come. There was a point during his record-breaking run of consecutive goals where he'd scored with 3 of his last 3 shots, which is incredible. We used to talk about a striker that missed too many opportunities, but he's definitely changed.
Yeah, he's on the England front as well. I think Kane and Rashford are absolute gimmies in the England squad at the moment, and I make it that there's 3 spaces for players who can play up front. So Rashford obviously can play wide as well. So Kane and Rashford are always going to be there. But then at the moment, it's a straight shootout between Tony and Ollie Watkins. At the moment, I think, to be fair, Tony's been very, very consistent all season and the second half of last season. So I think he deserves his spot in the side at the moment. But I think Ollie Watkins is the next cab off the rank. To be honest, I think he's the next in line. And I think Southgate's a big fan of him as well. So don't be surprised to see him back in the England squad at some point, because Southgate's a big fan. And I do believe he's the next in line. Now, I won't ask Neil to put the graphic up because everyone said they couldn't see it last time, but we will get them added in post-production. Very professional. I mean, I'm speaking like we're absolute experts in the field, but as we can't get the graphic to work live at the time, we're obviously not experts in the field at all. So in terms of minutes per goal, Ollie Watkins is actually ahead of Juan Pablo Angel in terms of minutes to goal per goal, Greg. Are you surprised by that?
No, not really.
I think I was surprised,
season, didn't he? But
I was surprised by that.
He had a lot of games where he didn't score goals. So, no, I mean, Watkins has been pretty consistent other than the first half of this season. He has regularly scored goals for Villa.
And we can see the graphic according to AVFC Stata as well.
Good.
So I'll just read them out.
Thanks for the feedback. We get in there.
Yeah, we make look at Neil, the legend, becoming a producer in his own right now on the Villa View. I'll just read them out again for the audio listeners. So Christian Benteke is number 1. His minutes per goal is at 146.46. Dwight York is at number 2 with 160.88. John Carew, number 3, 172.24. Dion Dublin, 174.18. 5th is Julian Joachim, who I think is a very underrated striker in his time at Villa, 175.53. Ollie Watkins then comes in at 6, 183.11. Juan Pablo Angel beneath him, 205.67. 8 is Darius Vassell, 215.33. Number 9 is Dean Saunders, 220.34. And then Gabriel Bonlahor, our all-time Premier League record goal scorer, is number 10 in goals per minute, 242.62. Angel had a couple of absolutely outstanding seasons for Villa. One and it was the John Gregory and then Graham Taylor and then the David O'Leary first season. So I was actually a little bit surprised to see Ollie Watkins in at number 6, Greg. But again, you'd expect in the next few years he's going to probably get that down and move up the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, you got to keep scoring, haven't you? It's difficult. Sometimes the more games you play, the harder it becomes. I mean, you just see Benteke up there at the top. I mean, it's incredible.
He's a joke.
He was
in a poor side as well.
Yeah, he was a 1 in 2 player, weren't he? I remember Tim Sherwood saying at the time, when he revealed in a press conference that there was a buyout clause in his contract, which, I mean, people in football obviously knew, but, the wider footballing world didn't at that point. So, yeah, he could have gone anywhere, couldn't he, Benteke, at that point? He literally could have gone to any club.
I had the wrong move.
But, Liverpool appealed to him for a lot of reasons. So, you can look back at it in hindsight and say, well, he should have gone somewhere else. But at the time, it really appealed for him. So I can understand why he went. But yeah, looking at Watkins there ahead of Angel. Again, in another interview I did with Angel, I can't name any names, but I remember him saying that his goal scoring record would have been a lot better if he had some decent players alongside him. And there were actually a couple of players that he named, again, I won't say who he said didn't even deserve to be a Premier League player. So I'll let you make your own judgments on that. I
can't for the life of me think who we'll be talking about.
Well, they'll have to stay private, unfortunately. I said that I would never reveal who he said. It was all done in private. So
the worst thing is, I know you won't even tell me after the show. That's the worst thing. The worst thing about you. You are very good at keeping secrets. I know you won't.
But it's part of the job. You have to have private conversations with people, and if for people to trust you in the future, these conversations have to remain private.
Let me know in the comments.
I've teased it a little bit there, and I think if you have a look through the squads, you'll come to your own conclusions.
I can say maybe I'm thinking too much about the seasons where he played every week and he did well and we had a decent team. And there was a couple of seasons where he didn't really get a look in, and we did have some poor players in that side, and he wasn't really part of that team. Graham Taylor didn't really play him. In fairness, so that'll be interesting. And David Stiles said Chatham House rules. I don't even know what that means. What is that? Do you know what that means, Greg?
Sorry, repeat that.
Chatham House rules, keeping secrets. I don't even know what that means.
No, sorry, lost me on that. We just really think.
Yeah, it's looking like it, isn't it? It's looking like potentially we're both very thick. Let's just look at the goals per game, and this is the one that really surprised me. If Neil can get the graphic, can you let me know in the comments that you can see it? That would be absolutely wonderful. So, in terms of goals per game, Ollie Watkins is actually second, Greg, for Aston Villa Premier League strikers. Again, I wouldn't have expected that, but I love seeing it. He's obviously boosted himself in the last few weeks. But for him to be sitting second in that list, he's ahead of Dwight. He's just edged ahead of Dwight York now, Greg.
I mean, you say edged ahead, Dan. So the more games he plays, the more impressive that figure will be. He's probably the reason he's there is because he's played a fewer amounts of games than others. So we'll go back to Benteke again, and there was the proof. He was literally a 1 in 2 striker almost there.
Well, Watkins has now been at the club around the same amount of time Benteke was. At the end of this season, he'll have done 3 seasons like Benteke did.
Yeah, I mean, I know, but I'm saying some of the other ones, but the Benteke figure is just ridiculous. He's a 1 in 2 striker, so you're just not going to find that regularly as a Villa player, unfortunately. And if you do that, sadly, they just get snapped up by a bigger club, don't they? That's how it worked with Benteke. And look, if Watkins had those figures, I'm sure he would be interested in other clubs as well.
Let's just read the list again for the audio listeners. So Christian Benteke, in terms of goals per game for Aston Villa Premier League strikers, he's top with 0.47. Watkins is second with 0.35. Dwight York third, 0.34. Dean Saunders fourth, 0.34. John Carew, 5, 0.33. Dion Dublin, 6th, 0.30. Julian Joachim, 7th, 0.28. 8, Juan Pablo Angel, 0.25. Number 9, Gabby Agbolnahor, 0.23. And number 10 is Darius Vassell at 0.22. Now, if we could just get the graphic up of the all-time Premier League top goal scorers, I'm going to see if we can actually get this to work on the podcast. Again, in the chat, let me know if you can see this time. I find that list really, really. I think that's a low list for the amount of seasons Villa have spent in the Premier League and the amount of strikers Villa have had. Greg, I think all round those numbers aren't great. Like Gabby's probably relatively safe for a few years, and if Villa were to get rid of Watkins, he'd be extremely safe. And he's just sat there for ages. York has been in the top 3 for too long, really, on 60, hasn't he? You'd expect. That list. I just think the numbers aren't as high as maybe they should be for other teams who've been in Premier League the same amount of time as Villa. I don't think those numbers are that high.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, look, it's hard, isn't it? Because one, you've got to keep scoring the goals, consistently every single year, and then 2, you've got to be at the club for a very long time. So you have to be at the club for sort of over 4 or 5 years to get into the top 2, 3. Definitely the top.
I suppose football's changed, hasn't it, in terms of but a lot of those strikers will have been there a while.
Yeah, players just don't stay at clubs, that long anymore. So it's difficult. As I say, if you've got a striker that's scoring 17, 18, 19, 20 goals a season consistently for 3 seasons, there's going to be a bigger club interested in him. So it's just hard. It's just harder to get those numbers. Gabby's record, actually, he's not that bad, is he? I mean, his goals record, he's very good, but 0.25 goals per game. That's 1 in 4. So it's not actually that bad.
He did spend a lot of. Once O'Neill left, he basically was playing as a left winger as well. He very rarely played centrally, Gabby, after O'Neill left. I suppose teams playing 2 up front, that used to help as well. Maybe that's where Villa will come alive in the next few years, because we do play 2 up front.
Yeah, and you'd expect somebody to come in to almost replace Bailey, or as a starter. So it'd be interesting to see whether it's Watkins and another striker up there, or Watkins and a wide type player. That'll be interesting over the summer.
Have you heard? I mean, you're not going to answer the question that I'm about to ask. Have you heard any names for Villa strikers? Some Tammy Abraham's one that keeps coming up. I don't know whether that's a lazy link or not.
Yeah, I mean, look, Tammy Abraham will obviously be well liked by the owners, by Christian Purslow, because they would know him from his time at Villa previously. So he's somebody who of course, he's going to have some sort of appeal. I don't know whether Emery, wants to try and sign him. I don't know at this point. All I know from conversations that I've had is that he's set some very ambitious targets of players that he would like to get. We know that Athletic Bilbao's Nico Williams is a target as well, not necessarily a striker, but somebody he'd like for those wide positions. But I think Villa are going to be, well, certainly Emery is very, very ambitious. Whether Villa can pull off a deal to get one of those players over the line, I think might be a little bit more difficult. So it might come to a stage where he maybe has to just lower his expectations a little bit, and because the players that he's looking at are some real top level players.
ABFC Stato's giving us some gold in the comments. With players that have over 15 goal contributions in the Premier League for Aston Villa, Danny Ings has the best minutes to goal contributions ratio at 143.26 per goals contribution. That again, I find that quite surprising.
Yeah,
goal contributions, goals and assists, isn't it? So actually, that doesn't surprise me, because he did get a lot of assists
and didn't play too often, did he? So
in and out, I would describe his time as.
But yeah, I think Villa did the right thing moving him on in the end. That 12 million potentially rising up to 15 million will go towards a new striker. And look, we know Villa are owned by 2 billionaires, but and they're willing to invest money into the club continuously, but you still got to move players on and raise funds to help signings as well. Can't just keep investing money.
No, I'm just trying to think where I would rank him would he be in my top 5 Premier League strikers for Villa? Because the top 2 is a given. I think with York and Benteke, they're the 2 best for me. And then probably underneath that, you've got Angel, Dublin. I feel like I feel like I may be missing someone here, but Angel and Dublin would probably be the ones that leap out to me to come underneath. And I did really like Julian Joachim. I thought he was an underrated finisher in his time at Villa and an underrated player. I think Watkins over the next year or two, he's probably got a chance to come in that rung just below York and Benteke. I'd put them in the same, like just absolutely class category. I loved watching both of them. Dwight York made my childhood very, very happy, scoring goals for Aston Villa. And Benteke made what was a miserable time being a Villa fan bearable just by the way he played the game. So Carew and Gabby as well. I do have a lot of time for Gabby. You can't really overlook the fact that he is Villa's top goal scorer in Premier League history. But Watkins has got a chance. Basically, the good thing for him is now he's got a chance over the next year or two to get himself really up all those tables that we've shown. He's got a good chance. He could feasibly be in the top 3, top 4 all-time Premier League goal scorers for Aston Villa, and that's good. The 28 million that the Villa spent was money well spent.
100%. You know, it was a lot of money at the time, but when you look at the other strikers that Villa have bought under Wes Edens and Nassif Sawiris, you know, Watkins is the standout player. You spent 22 million on Wesley. Unfortunately, that didn't work. He had a terrible injury, one of the worst that medical staff at the club have ever seen. So he just wasn't the same player after that. That was disappointing. Obviously, Samata came in as, you know, one of the only strikers who was available on the market at that point. Villa tried, you know, so hard to get Giroud and Slimani in and other players like that, and they just couldn't get a striker in. So they had to take Samata to top up the numbers, as well as Borja Baston, of course. And you know, we've mentioned Danny Ings. Tammy Abraham was another striker signed on loan, you know, during this ownership regime. So you're looking at Watkins. He's the real standout striker over the last 5 years. They invested heavily in him, £28 million, and it shows you can actually go down to the Championship. You don't have to.
I want to ask you.
You don't have to go abroad and pick someone out who's, you know, got all this potential. You can look at the Championship and see an upcoming player who's scored for a couple of seasons and gone on a journey himself and wants to join Villa and continue that journey. And you know, that's what Villa have done. They've given opportunities to players, and they've now made their international debuts. Matty Cash, Emi Martinez, Ollie Watkins. You know, these are all players that had interest from other clubs, but Villa told them, come to us, you know, we'll take you on this journey, and it's worked for them.
They're all players that had played in the Championship. Emi had spent a lot of time in the Championship. You know, Emi Buendia had played in the Championship as well. I think there's value to be had in the Championship, and it's something you used to see a bit more of. You think of some of the most effective signings in Premier League history. An example, like Tim Cahill at Everton, played for Everton for probably nearly a decade, $1.5 million. I know times have changed, but he was absolutely brilliant. I do still think if you look down in the Championship, there's some very good footballers. I guess Villa's thing used to be to go to Brentford and pick players off. But we can't do that anymore. Whatever tries we might. Brentford are ahead of us now in the Premier League, even though we finally beat them this season. Brentford seem to have something over us. It would be love to go and take Ivan Toney off them, in all honesty, but probably we're not capable of doing that now, because we're probably clubs that you look at as being at a similar level. Certainly they're having a fantastic season, but I agree with you. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head other than Brereton Diaz, really, that, you know, is there that striker in the Championship? I suppose Villa have a striker scoring a lot of goals in the Championship, don't
Probably
they?
one of the best. Yeah, I mean, well, you know, look at Chuba Akpom. Obviously, he's had to go on a different journey himself. He's been back and forth, started at Arsenal, and it didn't quite go to plan, but now he's the Championship's top goal scorer. But, you know, you're almost put off, aren't you, thinking, well, would he be any better than Watkins? And probably at this moment, no. And that maybe brings us on to Archer just ever so slightly, because I've written a little bit about him in The Athletic this week. I do think Villa would be a little bit foolish to let him go permanently this summer.
Of course.
I don't know what they'll do yet. The most sensible option sounds like sending him out on loan again, perhaps to, you know, the ideal situation would be Middlesbrough get promoted and they want to take him on loan again, or even put in a very big bid to sign him permanently. Although there's just a part of me that thinks he needs a little run in the team just to see if he can do it, because he's met
Especially
every challenge.
playing two up top.
Yeah, I just feel like last season he met every challenge. You know, he scored lots of goals in the cup competitions for Villa when he played. He went on loan to Preston, scored goals there. He scored goals for England under 21s. He's scoring goals now for Middlesbrough. Just feel like he does deserve a chance at some point, but it's going to be really hard because he's not better than Ollie Watkins. He's not going to be better than the striker Villa bring in over the summer. So automatically, at best, he's third choice striker, perhaps even fourth if you put him behind John Duran, who scored for Colombia today. So, yeah, it's going to be. It's going to be
I
tough.
take your point, but why not? Why not? If we're playing two up front, I know the one striker operates slightly differently. If you're playing two up front, why not have four strikers? Why not have those options to bring off the bench? But you've got five. You've got five subs. Arteta's done a lot of stuff around this at Arsenal. You know, he's not calling them substitutes at the moment. I can't remember what he's calling them, but he's not calling his players that are substitutes because they're still coming on and getting substantial game time. The game's completely changed now with his five subs. You've got the flexibility to use people. I think that, especially when two of them are young as well.
It just won't happen. The four strikers, they just won't get. There'll be one, maybe two of them that just won't get enough minutes, and they just won't feel like there's a point of them being there almost. You know, if Archer stays for another season at Villa and he's just used for 5 or 10 minutes here and there, he's going to lose all his momentum again. That's what happened in the first half.
It's such a funny one with Archer. It really is a funny one.
It's really difficult, and I've tried to write as much as I can around it. So the article I wrote this week goes into a lot more detail about it, and goes through all the options that perhaps Villa might have and that Archer might have. I watched him for England under 21s on Saturday, and he struggled a little bit, to be honest, up against two really tall young French defenders. So it was difficult for him, but you can't judge him on one game, of course. So yeah, I just think he's going to be hard for him, and I do think that he does deserve that chance at some point, just to have a run to see if he can score the goals in the Premier League. That's the only thing he hasn't done yet.
It's a real tough one for the club, and it's a real tough one for him. Can you imagine if Middlesbrough got promoted and Villa had loaned into Middlesbrough for the season and suddenly he scores 15, 20 goals in the Premier League? The club will get absolutely slighted. Well, why have they let him go on loan to Middlesbrough? I know he wouldn't be able to play against Villa, but if he was scoring goals in the Premier League, the club would get absolutely piled on.
I'm not sure, actually, Dan. I'm not sure they would. That if that scenario unfolded and Middlesbrough got promoted and wanted to take him on loan again, and he did really well for them, I think actually that's the best thing that can happen, because Villa then know 100% they've got a striker who can score Premier League goals, and they just take him back then.
Yeah, but then you still gonna have the same problem.
But if he scored in the Premier League, he's reached a new level, and he's shown that maybe he's going to be ahead of somebody then at that point. Yeah,
I just think it would be. You're then still going to be in the same situation where you've got the four strikers, because just Villa are still going to have bought a striker, aren't they? So the thing that you're saying is a problem. If it happens this summer, would still be a problem the next summer. I feel it's a real bizarre one. It does feel bizarre.
I mean, that's the it's a good thing though. It's good to have the options, because Villa want to produce more of their players, more of their own players. They need to become more self-sustainable. So look, if they've got a player who could fetch 10, 15 million if they sold him, is that 15 million maybe too much? I don't know. The value of players now is
crazy. For Davis, wasn't it, after his loan?
It's hard to know, isn't it? But if you can be producing players, the Villa have got 5 players who are playing in the Championship at the moment. Could get £25 million for those players, and that could be used to fund new signings. But hopefully they might integrate one or two of them at some point.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. The most amazing thing about Cameron Archer is no one had really heard anything about him. He wasn't one that anyone particularly had high hopes for. I don't think he had a couple of loan spells, didn't he, or one loan spell that didn't go brilliantly. Suddenly scoring a hat-trick in the Carabao Cup, and like you say, I think the most impressive thing about him is he scored at every level. Every chance he's been given, he's taken. It's kind of really, what more could he have done to get a chance at Villa? So if he doesn't get a chance at Villa, what's any young striker ever going to do to get a chance, if that makes sense? Because he's done it all.
It does, but sometimes you just have to trust the manager, and obviously we don't see what goes on in training. And you've had Steven Gerrard, who wanted to keep him around but didn't play him. The most frustrating time would have been for him against Bolton, Archer, when he came on for 9 minutes, which was ridiculous. But Villa had already won the game. Then they needed to give him more minutes, surely, in a game like that. And then you've had Emery, who's just allowed him to go straight on loan, as well as selling Danny Ings. and saying, well, we'll stick with Ollie Watkins and John Duran and have a look at him because we've heard good things from the club on how much they've pushed to sign him, and spent 6 months tracking him. So sometimes you have to trust the manager's judgment and think, well, perhaps he, as harsh as he sounds, perhaps he just isn't good enough to play for Villa at this stage. But the way I look at it, he's he's ticked every box. He's hit every challenge that he's been given. And the one thing that's missing is the run of Premier League games, and then goals. I remember speaking to Richard Beale, who was his old under-18s coach. Now, there weren't too many people at Villa who really fancied him at that point, Archer.
Yeah.
But Richard Beale left, and he went to Solihull Moors to be the assistant manager at Solihull Moors. And if you remember, it was him, Richard Beale, who took Archer on loan for Solihull Moors. And I think he scored 4 goals in 17 games or something like that. So the record wasn't great, but he had a couple of niggling injuries at that point and was going back and forth from Villa. So they're having to manage him. But I spoke to Beale after his loan spell, and he said he was really effective in lots of the games. We spoke a little bit in depth about his finishing, how good of a finish it was. Left foot, right foot, which he's scoring for Middlesbrough now. Similar to Watkins, scoring with both feet, which is a big trait, obviously, because it makes it harder to defend against. Defenders don't know which way you're going to go, etc. And look, he's kicked on massively, I think, in 18 months, Archer. So it'd be a shame to see not get that chance.
Yeah, Gaz Oakes makes the point that Liverpool got 20 million for Brewster. 10 to 15 million isn't really that ridiculous. I think that's a valid point. Liverpool have
Solanke as well. He went to.
They've made a lot of money off. They've made a lot of money, Liverpool, off selling players that perhaps haven't made it in the Premier. I know Solanke's playing in the Premier League now, but academy players who didn't really play for them. I don't know whether it's just because the name Liverpool, but they sold some players for big money, particularly to Bournemouth. That it beats big money for people who've done very little, really. So yeah, I don't want him to go. I want him to.
That's what the harsh reality is. That's what Villa want to do as well. Yes,
yeah, they makes sense.
They want to produce players, so they have an option on either integrating them into the team, and if they're not quite good enough to integrate them into the team, sell them on for big money.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. For too many years, Villa were making nothing off selling players because no one wanted any of our players, and we were taking huge losses. Some of the money Villa spent in the Championship on the likes of McCormack, Hogan, Codger, and then all those players pretty much went for nothing as far as I remember. You can't just keep spending money on players that don't do anything for you and losing it. You need to make money every way you can, and developing players, like you say, even if they don't make it at Villa, that's a way of making money. Michael Huggins says here, this is what Man City do. They sold Lavia in the summer to Southampton. Yeah, you can make. Chelsea have sold people for 20, 25 million who've never played a game for them. Gay went to Palace for 20 million, few loans in the Championship. It's a clever way to be, and Villa with this Portuguese link
back for 100 million in the year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then have to shift them on loan. Yeah, I mean, this Portuguese link up is going to be interesting. One for players going there to develop and being able to send players there. That's what Man City did well with all their stable of clubs. Players have gone and played there, never played for Man City, but been sold for 10, 15 million pounds. If you can do that, it's a good way to operate. Villa have obviously got to be better in the transfer market as well, because they've had maybe 18 to 24 months of not being great in the transfer market. The last good window they had was when they shopped in the Championship and got cash. They got Watkins, they got Emi Martinez from Arsenal. That was the last really good window that Villa had. So, Chukwuemeka, I can't read that name. Icomix D says we sold Chukwuemeka for a good profit. I think Villa were quite pleased in the end to make that 20 million for Carney, because they got very minimal money for him in the summer, so they've got that profit there. So Grealish has ended up going for 100 million. It is developing your own players.
Jacob Ramsey in the team now, who's going to developing into a 30, 40 million pound player potentially as well, isn't it?
He'll be, in my eyes, Jacob Ramsey at some point will play for England. So that's another international player that Villa hopefully will have developed.
He's certainly heading in that way, isn't he? He was excellent on Saturday. I haven't seen the game tonight, but he's the captain, so they think highly of him.
Yeah, good to see. Let's finish. I mean, we've had a trip down memory lane, and then we've ended up doing a whole show about Ollie Watkins that we wanted to do, and then we've been talking about strikers for 10, 15 minutes as well. International break. bad news for Villa. Matty, Cash, Greg, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, grade 2 calf injury, which is disappointing for him. Probably going to be out for sort of 2 to 3 weeks. Definitely going to miss the next 3 games, which is a blow for him and a blow for Villa, I think, because he's been in decent form.
Just found some form.
Yeah, and it's been hard. It's been hard for the defenders, getting used to a new way of working under Emery, and especially at the right back position, because Cash is an attacking right back, where Emery only allows whoever plays at right back to attack in certain games. That there are very specific instructions for the right back. The left back is always given a lot more freedom to get forward. It's just Emery style. So the options that Villa have got, obviously to the light for light replacement would be bring Ashley Young back in there, or you've got the possibility of Callum Chambers, who has played at right back previously. And then, a slightly left field move might be to move Konza to right back, bring Diego Carlos back in at centre back when he's fit, and play alongside Tyrone Mings. I've written about this in length today, so go and have a read on that in The Athletic. I won't go over the whole, all the ins and outs of it, because I've written about it already, so it's all down in writing.
You're sick to the back teeth of it, aren't you?
I mean, it's just easier to go and read it rather than 45 minutes into a podcast me going over every permutation. But I think the obvious one is bring Ashley Young back in for starters. You don't have to change too much of a defence that's performing really well. Then, if you decide to put Konza at right back and then bring Carlos in, you're mixing up a defence that has kept 3 clean sheets in 4 games by changing 2 positions. I feel like it'd be harsh on Konza to move him to right back when he's playing well, and perhaps maybe a little bit of a risk to bring Carlos back in a game against Chelsea. But the manager will know what levels they're at, and they did try, the 3 of them in defence last week against Bristol Rovers in a friendly.
Yeah, I mean, I won't spoil your article, because obviously you want people to pay and people do pay to read your stuff. But there's a lot of games coming up in a short space of time. Obviously, the Easter period, you'd expect to see Carlos on the pitch at some point in those 3 games. Potentially, I wouldn't think that the Chelsea one is the one for messing around, and it'd be harsh on Ashley Young as well, because he hasn't done. He's arguably you could make a case for him being Villa's player of the season. Really, Ashley Young, he was so good at one stage. He's still got it. I want to see him get another contract. In fact, let's introduce a new segment to the podcast of what do we want Greg to ask the manager in the press conference this week. I don't know whether you would have had a chance yet. Ollie Watkins' contract situation is definitely something that I'd like to know about. And I can't think there was something else I was going to suggest, but I've completely forgotten what it was, which is great podcasting from me. But
I can try and find out some more details. But yeah, I mean, the manager won't give much away on that front. They're very protective, as we know.
Ashley Young will start. It's a no. But I think with Cash, though, you interestingly just talking about his role, he hasn't actually been a right back for that long. You're saying he's an attacking fullback. The guy was a winger for a long, long time. He had 1 season at right back before he came to Villa, and now he's been playing for Villa in the Premier League at a right back and playing for Poland in the World Cup as a right back. But he hasn't actually been a right back for that long. So it's amazing, really. So it will take him a period to adjust to that slightly more inverted right back that stays in his own half a bit more, because his natural instinct is to attack, Greg.
To get forward, yeah. And look, that would have been a challenge. I've spoke to Cash after the Crystal Palace game, where he got the assist to set up Watkins, and he was given a bit more freedom in that game. But then last week against Bournemouth, he was told basically you got to sit back. We need to limit the counter-attacking threat. And look, the system and the formation works. You got to trust in Emery. He certainly knows what he's doing, but for some players, it's just a little bit different adapting to it all. But I think Cash was really starting to come to terms with it. So, yeah, obviously I hadn't had a chance to see him because he'd been on international duty, but I presume he'd be gutted about missing the next 3 games, because they're all big for him for various reasons. Chelsea, a great game that you want to play him. Leicester and Forest, obviously his former team, Forest. So, disappointing he'll be.
I'm sure you'll find out at the next Cash family get-together. I'm sure there'll be one coming up for you that you'll be invited to as an honorary member of the Cash family. Greg, a few people asking in the comments about Kamara. I guess once you've been to the press conference, you'll know more about that.
Yeah, just haven't had an update on Kamara yet. Dendonka played in the friendly last week, so he's back and available. Kamara, I wrote earlier in the month that he'd be out for at least a month. That's still, what I'm told. We'll just have to check with Emery on Friday to see if he's recovered quicker than expected. But it was always earmarked to miss these next 3 games anyway. So if he comes back any earlier, then it's quicker than expected.
Yeah, and someone I've lost it now, but Kessler Hayden, because he's back at the club. He's a right back, isn't he? Would he come into the match day squad? He seems to have just gone completely.
I mean,
he's wasted half a season for him, isn't it?
Yeah, possibly. I think Villa are actually quite blessed with defenders on the bench to an extent. So
because Chambers could play right back as well.
Chambers can play there, Young can play there. The reason they're playing with 8 at the moment, starting with 8 on the bench, is just because there are no kids really that are seen as worthy of getting into the squad. I don't think Cash picking up the injury immediately opens up an opportunity for Kessler Hayden, because Dendoncker will just come back into the squad anyway. I feel like Kessler Hayden has lost, excuse me, his momentum. Over these last few months. I think he started 5 games in the last 4 or 5 games for Huddersfield, but they decided to send him back. So, it's been disappointing for him. It'll be the key for him now is to get the right loan move set up for next summer and try and get some of that momentum back, because unfortunately he's gone backwards.
Of that cup winning side, that youth cup winning side, it was him and Carney were the 2 that stood out to me as I thought they're 2 that have potentially got futures. At Villa, I expected Kessler Hayden to be battling out with Cash for the right back spot by now. Based on that cup run, from what I saw of it, they were the 2. I watched them 2 in the flesh in the final. I was at that final. Them 2 just looked built, and they looked ready for the Premier League and ready perhaps to make a climb at Villa, especially in pre-season games that I saw as well. Strange.
Kessler Hayden went to Swindon, did very well. I remember him playing against Man City, and
he was
they
brilliant.
were impressed with him. He moved to MK Dons, went up a level, playing in the League 2, League 2 to League 1, and then he got the Championship move. Huddersfield are just a bit of a mess, aren't they? So sometimes you just get the wrong move. It didn't quite work out for him. Perhaps if he'd have gone to another club, his momentum might have continued. So these things happen in football. It's hard when you're a lone player and you keep moving around. It's difficult.
Yeah, there's obviously a few from that side out and about on loan at the moment. Greg, thank you ever so much for joining me. I think that does us. Thanks to everyone in the chat as well for joining in. Hopefully you've enjoyed this podcast, something a little bit different. Let us know in the comments where you think Ollie Watkins sits in terms of Aston Villa's Premier League strikers. Be interesting to see what some of you come up with in the comments. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening, however you've done it. Thanks for watching if you've done that. Remember, we are on Spotify as well, so we thank you for listening via that method if you are doing it via that method. We have the Stato preview and the match preview on the Villa View later on in the week. Keep your eyes peeled to our socials and we'll let you know when they are coming. Thanks to Neil Dunworth for stepping in and producing at the last minute while producer Adam baked a cake. We really appreciate you coming in and did a good job as well. Unexplained why the first graphic didn't work, but he recovered. The important thing is, Greg, when you make a mistake, you bounce back from it. And Neil bounced back and got the rest of the graphics on the screen. So well done to Neil. Yeah, have a good rest of the week. We'll see you in the next few days on the Villa View, up the Villa.